told and your voices be heard. May you shine like the moon, fly like a bird on wings of liberation. We will rise when we listen to the heart and the ways of the wise. On the flames of transformation, we will rise from out of the shadows and into the light. Into the light. Into the light.
Good morning and welcome to Unify Women Rising right here on Unify. If you haven't liked and followed Unify, please do, and check everything going on at unify.org. Sign up for the mailing list and get announcements for when we're going to be live. I am Debbie G. I am tuning in from Huntington Beach, California. I'm going to pass the mic over to Miranda Life Clendening.
Hi, I'm Life, one of the directors of Unify, and work with multiple regeneration projects. And we are in the middle of our Regeneration Renaissance series, and we have Jamaica Stevens here with us. I'm coming in from Crestone, Colorado. Jamaica is, she created the Re-inhabiting the Village book, which gives many resources about what's even going on in the regenerative space and the village building space, community building space, and has been one of my heroes and people I've learned from since I got into studying about this world. So such an honor to have you here and to be able to talk about some of the amazing new things you have going on with Open Future Coalition and Consensus and so many things that you're involved with. So such an honor to have you here. If you want to do a little brief intro and tell us where you're coming in from.
Yeah, I'd be happy. It's very much an honor to be here with you lovely women and everyone out there listening in today. I'm calling in from Northeast Washington State on our regenerative farm, 65 acres. We're here stewarding in the mountains. And I guess a short background would be that I consider myself a social ecologist, particularly in service to the reintegration of humanity as part of a living system, a reframe and a healing of ourselves as part of a living system. And then from that worldview shift, how do we align with retrofitting existing systems and innovating new systems for true thriving on the planet and really realign ourselves with the living world and work with nature to solve some of these incredibly complex challenges that we're facing right now. So I'm a social ecologist and a facilitator and a convener. My favorite game is bringing wonderful people together and watching the magic and alchemy that happens when we create containers of meaning and purpose and really open up the possibility for our genius to get to sort of alchemize together. And do a lot of consulting work and a lot of social impact work. And when I have every other moment that I can that I'm not on the computer, I'm out there making herbal medicines and tending our land here and just trying to bring it home and live it as a personal practice, the way that I want to sort of live my life, and then have that be a foundation and base for any of that activism and work that I do.
We are so grateful that you are spending your morning with us. Thank you so very much. It's incredible. And for everybody that's joining us right now, good morning. Let us know where you're tuning in from yourself. And do you have any questions? Please type them into the chat. Let's welcome Amber Hartnell. Amber, welcome.
Hello. Everyone.
As always, it's so beautiful to see you.
Thank you, Debbie. And it's an honor always to be here in these elevating conversations that we get to have on Saturday mornings. And I'm tuning in from La Costa, California, just perched above Encinitas, looking out at the ocean and the fog bank right now. And really delighted that you're here with us, Jamaica. Every word that you speak is so profoundly resonant. And like Miranda, too, I consider you one of my heroes and one of the very lucid voices of this movement. So thank you.
I'm so personally excited because I have a lot to learn from you. And I've been loving this series. If you've missed any of them for the last 2 weeks, this is our third. We have been playing we have been bringing on incredible guests with great information. So you should have checked out the replays. And without further ado, the beautiful goddess, Rachel Morrison.
Hey everyone, so good to be here with you guys. I'm tuning in from Loveland, Colorado, at an eco village that I've been living at over the last 12 years or so called Sunrise Ranch. And I'm so excited that Jamaica is on for a gajillion reasons. But I'm really wanting to dive into these ideas of hyper-localized communities and the benefit of them, because I feel like that topic and conversation can be such a beneficial opportunity for everyone that's tuning in to start at a right now scale and then see the ripple effect of that at a larger design. And so if we could touch into that, Jamaica, a little bit, maybe as like our first like riff round, that could be really amazing.
Yeah, well, it's a subject I'm deeply passionate about, and more lately, I think I want to use the word resilience has been like a core theme, and coherence has been a core theme. And this, knowing that we're building these regenerative systems and sort of moving ourselves towards a regenerative paradigm that in some ways is like a long, deep, slow shift as much as it is like a rapid response to things I think that might be more volatile and change more quickly than we could ever imagine. Yet in the meantime, between sort of where we have been and the eons we've been culminating to this, apex, and where I genuinely believe that we're evolving and heading towards, there's a space, this liminal space of a lot of uncertainty and the unknown. And what's been really alive for me and a lot of the work is preparing that global citizenry, the consciousness of a global citizenry, to not count on the existing systems. In fact, the existing systems are crumbling, and I think there's a purpose and a meaning to that. I think that positive disruption has to happen, or disruption anyway, whether it's positive or not is our choice of how we want to leverage disruption. But disruption is what's required for any true systems change or any true evolution or rite of passage. So this concept of like dropping into, so how do we become adaptive and resilient as people of place at a global scale as rapidly as we can? How do we resource that more local food security, food shed, water security, relationships of meaning and exchange and sort of trust between our most intimate neighbors, not only sort of our global allies and friends that we align with, but knowing the people that live around you and forming a relationship of just, even if they don't share the same political values, or, you wouldn't necessarily hang out with them at a dinner party, can you exchange, kindness at minimum? Like we bring eggs to our neighbors. They're nothing that I would imagine spending like intimate time with, but there's a rapport that we start to build by just being kind and modeling that fact that we are interdependent and connected. And I think those kinds of actions, of very simple things we can do to notice where our food comes from and consider supporting more local farms and supporting more sort of local food shed and understanding where water comes from and how can we be conservationists, along with understanding sort of the wilds and the medicine craft and what can you eat that's forageable right in your own area. It's sort of like this, potential for a need to shift very rapidly the comforts and the securities that we've imagined, for me, is only in some ways a foundation for a way of being and living that's just inherently more regenerative and aligned within a village ethic anyway. But sometimes we need that impetus to make the kind of change when we're sort of comfortably embedded in a system. And as that system shifts, I think each personal choice and our like interpersonal relationships and community relationships, just at that very personal and interpersonal local scale level, is the place we have the most power to decide for ourselves where we want to be resilient and adaptive and prepared for anything, and move towards a way of living that is a more regenerative, holistic paradigm that kind of starts to extract ourselves from an extractive economy and a kind of hyper globalized way of living that everybody's seeing is fragile. So I think there's just like a wisdom in returning to this more like become a person of place. And what does that mean to not only sort of take from place, but start cultivating place and give back and create artisan cultures and support local economies. And there's just like a way of living that I think we'd be wise to move towards anyway. And it also creates more resilience if the things that people have depended on no longer exist. So I've been really passionate about what can we do to educate, inform, empower, and inspire this sort of movement back to place as a foundation for anything we're talking about on global scale, like global scale change.
Wow. Absolutely, absolutely beautiful. So, what about 101? or R&R for Dummies. Where do we get started? Those of you that are listening right now, this is something like me that is inspiring and something that I want to step into and will be very soon. How do we get started? What are some of the ways that we can begin to do this in our environment?
Well, and I think many of you here probably are advocates for this and practitioners of this, but I think it has to start with a deeply personal shift. I think that there's a bit of a over indexing towards the external and what do we need to change external, and from a really grounded place of really connecting in and taking kind of an audit of our own internal coherence and our own resilience and our own practices and our own sort of where do I fit in sort of my complicitness or just my like awareness of how I move through the world, where I get my, these choices that I just named, some places you can start to begin to point to, and certainly can share some resources. But I think before it's even about what do I need to change or realign myself to, that maybe feels like a more holistic, kind of simple way to live that feels more approachable in times of great change and flux. I don't even think we can approach those behavioral changes until we really have a personal consciousness shift. So I think the foundation of anything we're talking about globally has to start with just like, who am I? What are my values? Like, how do I put those values into practice? How do I look for creative ways, even small ways to build momentum towards a life that I want to live, and not be sort of shaming that I'm not already there, like looking at like, well, those are all great or best practices, but like I'm not there and it seems like too much and I don't even know how to just radically all of a sudden change my, food, how I buy my food, or I don't know how to just all of a sudden grow a garden. I think there's ways to start with shifting what we can move towards and making the committed personal practice to just start to find resources, educate, learn, look around, pay attention, find out about like, well, where does my water come from? And like, are there, just these internal questions that start, I think, the momentum to naturally start looking for and attracting other communities of practice or interesting tips or resources you had no idea about. So I think it really has to start with a very grounded, approachable, personal space, but a commitment to, a devotion to realizing like, this is something I can do with all the things going on in the world that I can't influence. Here's what I can do. And to make that empowering and meaningful and purposeful, and then just start building momentum and kind of awareness and resourcing that I think naturally leads us to like growing these, relationships of meaning and trade value locally, and, grows us communities that we start to engage in that are practicing ways of living that we want to. And then I think then it has this ability to actually sustainably, or more importantly, regeneratively sort of move towards awareness of what then can I commit that serves or gives back to a global citizenry, to this idea of planetary family and consciousness. What can I contribute then from a place of my own kind of path and practice and coherence that's meaningful in any way? Because I do think the natural output of our own alignment to a way of living that aligns with the living world is to start wanting to give back, is to start to want not that only for yourself and your family and your community, but you start wanting that for all of humanity. And then really you start wanting that for all the generations. You start feeling yourself beyond like my own solidity and security and thriving. And you really naturally, I think, start to open ourselves towards being ancestors for other generations and other species children, and like that concept of something so much beyond ourselves. But I don't think we just jump there. I think we start with where we are and we like grow ourselves towards something that connects us to the rest of life.
That was beautiful.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah,
yeah.
Go ahead, Debbie.
I'm good. I was just going to say, I thought Rachel had a question, but Miranda, I think you do. So I'm just going to go back over here. And thank you, Jamaica.
Well, just a response to all of this. I mean, the reason that we decided to do this section in Women Rising and have, women leaders that are in this space, and literally moms and grandmas and homesteaders and a lot of us, trying to actually live this way and do this and help our communities to learn and have permaculture experts come and teach us. It really is something that as Jamaica's talking about, is something anyone can step into, whether you're living in a city or the country or in any country. And it is about being more conscious and caring more. And the conversation used to be about sustainability and doing things sustainably and not doing harm. And it still is. We still care about doing things sustainably, but why regenerative efforts is because you're going that extra step, as she's saying, and actually caring and giving back, and not just being sustainable and not doing harm, but creating generative or regenerative systems that produce more food, produce more energy for your household, for your community, for the earth, and regenerate the earth and any harm that has been done. And we talk about this, we've been talking about this on the show for the last few weeks, at a personal level with your own health and cellular regeneration. It's so hard for me to say that. I always get tongue-tied. Neural regeneration. There's all kinds of entire fields on how we get younger, get healthier, feel better, help our bodies to actually regenerate cells faster and be healthy. And then we talk about regenerative relationships. How are we creating thriving and abundance in relationships and giving more than we take and being of service, which can create very much more exquisite, amazing, artful relationships as we learn to give to each other in really special ways and be of service to each other. And then we talk about at a community level, which a lot of what Jamaica does and is talking about, living it on her farm and in her household, and which I also do here in my community. And Rachel, all of us are. And now Debbie is coming from being city girl to buying a 20-acre farm and she's learning all the science around growing microgreens and lots of cool stuff, that it's good to get your hands in the soil and just get out there and be growing your own food. And then talking about it at a global level, with Unify, it's so special what we're able to see with how much is going on in the regenerative space, with people getting land, sharing land with people, working together, working to clean up pollution and clean up beaches, clean up the oceans, plant trees. Constantly, millions of people are doing this, but it's not something that our news stations are talking about. I think that's the only thing they should be talking about. But we're here to say this is a huge movement that is growing, and people are becoming more and more conscious. And I feel there's something to feel bad about if you aren't helping make changes in your life, but only for a second, until you just start, have that realization that it's time to make some changes, time to recycle if you don't, time to look into vehicles that aren't polluting as much, or riding your bike more, or walking more, anything that just comes into your mind about what it means to be more conscious and in harmony with the planet. And then just taking one little step at a time. I mean, I can't even still afford an electric car. It's been a 3-year journey to get a house that's off the grid and on solar, which is one of our family's goals. But these things aren't fast. We're in a society where some of the things are interwoven that are harming our planet in some drastic ways, and we have to make some drastic changes as an entire civilization and society. But it takes every person waking up, being a little more conscious, caring a little bit more. But it's such a beautiful, beautiful process.
Yeah, that's so great. Like, one of the things that I'm hearing in my mind right now when I hear regenerate, I hear like keep giving. And I think that's been a spirit that's been in our conversation today. And I think that is one of the most active things that we can do right here, right now, is just to keep giving. But we may not know all the answers to all the big questions that we have when we really look with the eyes to see and hear with the ears to hear all that's happening. But we can find that very next thing that's ours to be wildly generous with, because it's the thing that gives life, right? When we talk about extractive economies versus regenerative economies, there's such an opportunity for all of us to just, if we stay in the vibration of generosity, when the big questions come up, it's an easy muscle for us, because we've been doing it at a lot of small decisions that have created a lot of meaning. And when we have an opportunity for a big leap, it feels easier for us. And that's such a joy. I'm thinking of a woman, her name's Audrey Kitagawa. And she's a fantastic woman who does a lot of really amazing things in the world. And I've been lucky enough to have lunch at her house a few times. And what I learned, she in some sects, she's considered like the great mother of a spiritual organization. And she also does a lot of things with a lot of other things. But she taught me such a profound lesson on the spirit of generosity. And how when we do that, when we give, we have more to give. And I see that so much in our communities and in the friends that we have around the world. And a lot of that is happening in this group of people. This group of people that are on this call right now have such a high spirit of ever-flowing generosity, whether it's with their care, attention, and presence, their knowledge, or whatever's going on anywhere. Like this group of women is so inspiring to me on the spirit and wellspring that comes from an ever-flowing cup. And when we can feel that within ourselves and that it is possible, right? There's so much more life that gets created around that spirit. And I know that each person on this call can attest to that. And I feel really excited when I think about all the people around the world who can also attest to that, or be willing to want to lean into that to see what's true for them. So it doesn't always have to be a giant systems change, make a drastic shift. It could just be like making sure the kids in your neighborhood have like a dinner when they're all playing at the end of the day, or something like that, or taking that extra time for that friend, just because you have a few extra moments. Or if it's hot outside and you see workers, make sure they have some like lemonade or a popsicle or something, right? It's just like, how can we always nourish ourselves? And how can we always nourish each other? And then how can we always nourish the planet? Because when we talk about these ecological things that are happening in the world, they're great, they're wonderful, they're true. And if the social structure around those ecological areas aren't on lock, there's not a sustaining foundation for them. If the communities aren't educated and supported occupationally to thrive in those areas by supporting the ecology, it's just not going to happen. They're going to be worrying about their other basic needs. So finding a way to include radically and to give audaciously, wherever you are.
I love this conversation so much. And I want to highlight and draw more attention to this thread that is being woven through all the conversation here. And that is about really attending to every small thing that we can find that we can do that's generative, that's life-giving. And I feel particularly in this time that we're in collectively, it's easy for people to feel powerless and overwhelmed with how much needs to be done. And about a year ago, I'm in a rental here, and a year ago, the guidance came that the most important thing I can do right now is actually just cultivate a garden. And in the cultivation of the garden, of being in relationship with the earth, tending and caring for life, how profoundly grounding that is for us, how that connects us in with what is most fundamentally true while we're witnessing the death throes of the dying beast, the old system that needs to be disrupted. It's not pretty, it's not pleasant, it can be scary at times. And so to really do what we can in all of these small ways to give towards what is life-giving, I feel is one of the most important and revolutionary choices that we can each make in this time. Mm-hmm. And increasing the beauty quotient, I'll add that to it as well. I feel that beauty cannot be underestimated, and our devotion to beauty and amplifying beauty is also the balm that this world needs.
I can really get behind you on this one. I love that. I love that. And I just want to take a moment and appreciate the beauty in each of you and all that you bring and all that you have brought to me and that you're teaching me. I just feel so honored. It just really, really appreciate you, all of you, deeply. Now, audience, we love you, and I see your comments, and I'm so grateful that you're here. And we put a couple of links into the chat, so go ahead and click on those, join our mailing list, and you can find more about Jamaica Stevens at her website, which is openfuturecoalition.org. Go ahead and check. You can snap on that. Now, without further ado, we're going to go back to Jamaica because she has a question for us.
I do. I mean, I have so many questions because I think that the inquiry and dialogue is just so rich, and it's this like way of accessing our collective wisdom and intelligence, and that is also, along with beauty, something I think we deeply need to lean into at this time. And thank you for naming the beauty, Amber, that inspiration that keeps us sort of focused in what really matters. The question I have is a bit about, like, the foundation of where I think, again, we can sort of, where our own personal life starts hitting the collective. I can't help it. I'm designed for the collective. Even if I wanted to like make it deeply personal, it's personal in context to this sort of collective. And that's okay. Except that's my experience in this lifetime to check out. But I wonder with all of you where that foundation of regeneration lives in you, and just a dialogue around like, how do we embody regeneration? Because I think that term right now, and you've hit some points of it, so I think we've already like aimed there, but I feel like there's sometimes sort of a naming of something that then we all sort of personally translate, and that means something very different. And unfortunately, also those terms end up being co-opted sometimes by the existing structures and constructs to go, oh, that's a word that's buzz, great, we'll take that, we'll devoid it of any meaning, we'll like greenwash it and not really like apply it, and then that word then doesn't have the same context and meaning because it's been sort of corrupted. And so from a place of true integrity of what do we mean by regeneration, I'm curious to each of you, like, how are you embodying regeneration, and then where do you sort of see that to sort of, planetary regeneration? So that's an inquiry I have of the personal journey of what are we translating and meaning to embody regeneration? What does this mean to us a little bit? I'd love to just explore that question.
I really think that's a powerful question. And I'm going to say that one of the first things I did was start right here on social media and pulling it together with Spirituality Gone Wild and all of the different beautiful tools that so many people have brought, giving it to the public. That's one way. But in my own life, personally at home, I was listening to Rachel, and she was talking about when you go and you give somebody who's working something to drink, or you notice when your gardener is like, it's hot, which isn't very often in Huntington Beach, but who cares? But it's just that idea that you are being kind because you can. It's the simple things. And I got to say it, putting your grocery cart back is a thing. It's a thing. Do it. It's just a thing. If you're curious, like, yeah, but I live in the city and what else can I do? Put your grocery cart back, please. But think of the things that you can start right here. It means a lot to me now, even more so. I grew up in the 80s and I didn't grow up in the 80s. I was becoming a young adult in the 80s. Let's be real here. I did not grow up in the 80s. I'm an 80s rocker chick. We didn't have the viewpoint. My parents didn't have the belief system. This is something I am now learning as I am 54 now, and I've really been embracing it the last few years. It's never too late to start is my reason for bringing that up. Is because it doesn't matter if you are 80 and this just isn't something that you have never done. I've just never done that thing. I don't understand why people are recycling. I don't understand. What does it really matter? And taking the time to figure out why does it really matter, or listening to shows like this to get some insight. But I think what we can do in our community is the biggest, most powerful message that I've been listening to all of you talk about. And I agree. I don't feel that we have enough of it here in the city that I'm in. And it would be beautiful to see those things happen, which actually Miranda's done a lot of work in helping to push that along and get the cool blocks out into. We do have a couple in Los Angeles, but it's the little things. I started with simply the mindset, and that's exactly where it begins. And I agree with you, and I'm grateful because I'm learning every time I'm on with you guys. So that's what I have to say about that.
I'd say my greatest motivation comes from my background is as a nurse originally, and I'm a mother of 5 kids. And being a nurse, you know, seeing what people are suffering from and seeing that we're putting a Band-Aid on and giving a pill to problems that are way bigger than that, and people not eating right or even knowing what that means, and so much pollution we're dealing with and chemicals in our food and all kinds of stuff that it just becomes pretty obvious when you're a nurse, what we're dealing with. So even in my 20s, I started looking around for, is there somewhere on the planet that's different than this, different than society, where people aren't exposed to so many chemicals and able to grow their own food and able to be there for each other? The amount of mental illness or anxiety, depression, from people not having community and not having family that they're tied to strongly, was also a really scary thing in nursing, to see how widespread that is, especially here in the US. So I started living in intentional communities, seeing that they might have the solution in a microcosm of something that could be different. And definitely. I saw many people walk into an intentional community, drop smoking, drugs, alcohol at the door, start eating organic, good food, and being out in the garden every day with people, and being assigned a job of being of service while they were there, and then having instant family and community surrounding them that they could go to meals with and be with every day. And it was a cure for so many diseases and mental health issues. And I definitely saw that there's a solution that they're tapping into. But I also think everybody can't just pick up and go live in an intentional community. They don't even have room, even with the 2,000 plus ones that are on the planet. So how do we have this in our regular societies, in our communities everywhere, in big cities everywhere? And how do we grow our own food together? And how do we become more conscious and healthy? And obviously for my kids, it's a big pressing issue that they have a future and have a planet that's still healthy, and that they can go to the ocean and still see coral reefs and dolphins in their future, and not have things be destroyed, huge forests that shouldn't be being cut down. So it's my passion. But I also learned through working with Unify and the many amazing people that have come and presented and are working on regenerative efforts, that there's so much of a bigger picture too. Like, one of the most exciting pieces is new economic systems that are coming for the future, crypto and blockchain, communities being able to form their own currency and technology that can show resource flow and value exchange, and then all of those communities connecting globally to become a huge new global economic ecosystem that becomes our economic ecosystem that creates thriving and abundance in the future. And I would say that the vision of that I got so strongly, Jamaica is a teacher of a lot of this, Fernanda Ibarra that we've had on here before, and Holochain. And I'd say once I saw that, it's like, I want to shout it from the mountaintops that we all need to work on this and get it going, and have these, you know, community banks, community currency systems, and ways that we can do trade and barter and help care for each other in way greater ways. And it is spreading quickly. There are a lot of people in that world starting to figure out how to do that more and more. So that's one of the things that keeps me going on a large scale too, is just to see that dream and vision happen. Even kids launching their own currencies and value exchange, I see them starting to get into it. There's a program called Seeds that there's some kids and youth that are building their own seeds, and it's just a cool world, how much is going on in this space.
I'll chime in here. So for me, in the beginning of your share, Jamaica, and you were speaking about where it starts, right? It starts here, that our internal ecology is really the fundamental. And so everything outside of us becomes an expression of that. So the ways that I apply that into embodiment is very literally into the body. First, the cultivation of our awareness, our consciousness, that we are continuously hooking up with that life-giving principle. And from that, able to begin to perceive and attune to the divine blueprint that is inherent within all of life. And as we attune to that, we can begin to recognize in our bodies where we need to clean up, and so that we can actually elevate our own physical experience to a higher octave. Thus, we have our eyes open and we can see where we can apply that outside of ourselves. So I've worked with a lot of different technologies, organic technologies, such as stem cells. My dear friend, Dr. Todd Ovokaitis, is doing some leading edge work with activating the 1-day-old pluriplasma stem cells that are free floating in our blood, millions of them. He's figured out how to wake them up, to activate them. They have the potential to become any kind of cell in the body. So I've been systematically rebuilding my body and aligning to my blueprint and experiencing levels of health and well-being and strength that are far beyond anything I've ever known. And I'm into my 40s now and feeling younger than I was 10 years ago with that, and again, stronger and more vibrant. And all of that really to support the capacity to show up to serve in fullness. To me, that's the point of all of it, right? That we maintain the wellness of our vessel so that we can be fully utilized by life in service to life. And then, as I mentioned before, like, we can't understate the importance of tending a garden. Even if you start a tiny little plot, maybe it's one raised bed, where you can consistently show up to nurture life and also experience and receive the fruits of one's labor. I feel that for me, that is essential to embodying this principle and really putting it into action. And in mothering for my family, making sure that that is extended to the ones who are in my immediate environment, that everything that I can do to support them to be as well and as healthy as they can be, so that we're a strong unit and able to show up for these times of change and vibrancy and our full thriving. Because if we want to see the thriving in the world, we have to be the living embodiment of that.
I love that, Amber. And what I'm hearing you speak to is this just ridiculous amount of life that is possible. And what I know in your experience and with others who have that capacity to bring forth such beauty, grace, life, is our willingness to have let go of things as well that no longer serve. And part of the regenerative process, we're going inward, outward, and anything macro is micro and micro is macro, then we have to look at some things. If there is a world that we see that is passing away, or whatever the verbiage is that we talk about in these regenerative cultures, what is it inside of me that I can let go of, that no longer serves, that is an old system paradigm, that I can make room for the beauty, the grace, and call into my this unparalleled desire for life. And I become that rooted system, my mycelial network, from a spiritual place or from a deeply personal place, that then brings that collaborative, unified, and highly effective way of being in the world that starts to click everything together. And I know so many of us don't want to do those things. It's like, can we just be regenerative and have my life stay the same? Because I'm pretty good and used to it, and like my patterns or whatever. But our willingness to turn inward and do all those things, so that because if we keep doing it to ourselves, whatever the it is, like, it's always going to be externalized as someone else not doing it right, or not human enough, or whatever. But the future is not usurped. It is benevolently co-stewarded. That is so compassionate, so inclusive, and so inviting to everyone, to where nobody attends the old party anymore, whatever it is, because the new party is so much more awesome and great and relevant that Like there's no other option to do other than like the movement of our collective evolution as not just a collective species, but as a reintegration of the organism of her Gaia herself. Regenerative, like Lover Earth, we are it. It is us. Let's go, because there is no separateness in that, which is why I love this idea of unified radiation, and all the things that come with it. And it all starts like I was talking to someone recently. He's an American soldier in Ukraine, and he said, just praying about it and meditating about it isn't going to stop the bullets from coming or from whatever's happening over there. And I got it, right? Totally get it. He's there in warriorship, doing what is needing to happen over there, or doing what he feels needs to happen. But I also say that there is a difference between praying and meditating and actively praying and meditating, to where we're not just like emanating, but there's something within us that is like incinerating anything within our own capacities that makes us more available for the life that is in front of us, without judgment, without greed, without justifications. And then life gets really exciting. Like the choices really start being made, and we start seeing the fruits of our labor. Because it's like not always easy to be still, be present, be loving. But when we do, and we see what's on the other side of the practice in motion, that's a fertile ground.
I think maybe I would just add a layer, or Deb, were you going to add something to that?
No, I actually wasn't going to add to it. I was going to bring up a really beautiful comment from one of our audience members, Cheryl Newton. A question we could ask ourselves is, what if it really does matter? What if it really does matter? And I thought that that was really, really great. Thank you, Miranda, for also seeing that. And thank you, Cheryl, for posting it. Also, I have posted into the chat Unify's brand new e-zine. Please check it out. It's awesome. Now, I'm going to hand it back to you, Jamaica.
Yeah, I was only going to highlight the richness of what each of you shared, the things that really sort of stand out for me about what I'm learning about regeneration is that we inherently already are regenerative. And you pointed to that, Amber, and you as well, Miranda, right, in the way of the fact that there's this idea that there's somewhere else to go, or we have to cultivate something we aren't already. And that really reframing of the fact that our bodies regenerate all the time, especially when given the conditions for flourishing. Obviously, some humans have struggled with that regenerative process, but inherently we're designed as regenerative. We heal after a cut, we recycle our cells, like that real, like, instead of something that feels like way out there, it's so, I think, powerful to come back and just sort of already align ourselves with the fact that we don't have to, there's not much you have to do. You are just being regenerative. All you have to do is realign and sort of bring an awareness, and then look at how the world is already regenerative. It's not like a thing we have to achieve. It's an alignment that we have to make to like participate in an existing regenerative system. And that's really interesting to me too, because there is a bit of this like it's this new innovative thing to look at systems and to look at sort of restructuring the way that we do things as if we aren't already that. And I think that's really a fundamental frame shift that has to happen again before we can look to like see the world through that lens, and then notice the fact that oh, not only is the world regenerating all the time, so are we. And then what are those processes that we need to align with to participate in that, as Rachel pointed to? And that a really big key for me has been to embrace the life, death, life cycle, to not only sort of prefer life, but to make meaning of anything that needs to be shed, composted, eliminated, and released as part of the regenerative pattern. And instead of that being something we cling to or have almost preferential treatment to constant growth, isn't that in some ways the rampant scaling of, and we point back to like our economies, these things that are very deeply value aligned, all of a sudden are then the behaviors and the ways that we sort of set up our world. But if we come back to the things that need to iterate and have value in letting things go and transform and transcend and compost, and like even destruction for the sake of creation, not just for constant perpetual destruction, but where are disruption and destruction and composting actually healthy parts of a system, as Rachel named, to like birth a renewal, to allow for something else to form, to be food and fuel for the thing that's going to be living next. And I think that, again, it's this constant shedding and letting go of that which we're clinging to, whether it's an old idea, whether it's an old way that we're sort of living on the planet. When consciousness does come and you realize it's not working anymore, when you naturally align with the time that says the time has come, this thing is ending, instead of it being this sort of trauma response of the clinging or that fight or flight that like sort of braces. I wrote this article, and I'll share some of the articles in the chat as well if it's useful, but one of the articles, wrote one around regenerative cultures. I'll send it. It's useful. But there was one I wrote that was right in the midst of COVID that's about the liminal, and how do we navigate the space between what is obviously, no longer available to us, and the way forward hasn't completely solidified into something tangible that we sort of have stepped into. That space in between. It's actually why I have, I'm going to get witchy here for a minute. It's why I have an Ouroboros on my shoulder, and the spirals of time and iteration, and this gap in between. The woman who initially drew it up had the mouth closed on the Ouroboros, which is an ancient symbol for this regenerative pattern of life. And I said it was really important to open the mouth and the tail, because that space of the liminal, I think, is a lifelong cultivation I have of finding my way to be comfortable and even realize that the space in between, that liminal unknown, is actually the seat of all creative potentiation. And so instead of this like grasp backwards towards something that was, that if there's anything I've learned, the universal pattern is life will keep changing. That's the one thing you can count on. Things will come to an end and a new beginning. That is the one thing we know happens. So if that's the only known, is that life is meant and designed to change and iterate and transform in these cycles and spirals. How do we relax into the trust that we're part of that too, and then anchor ourselves not in the sort of what is known or hurry up and grasp the next thing, which I think sometimes leads to sort of an uninformed ideation of grasping to something, anything, because it fills the void, and instead really ground into our own being and our own coherence and trust our own internal navigation system to sort of open up more senses that are available to us than just what is known, and really access that intuitive place. And because this show particularly is sort of about what that kind of yin wisdom, I'm really careful with the gendering of sort of male and female, because I think that what we're simply doing is embodying the integration of advancing where the yin has been out of balance for this like hyper yang. And as we rekindle that, I think we naturally access a more intuitive, instinctual way of being. And what I'm learning right now about within neurobiology, it's that animate intelligence that is the mystery. It is the unknown. It is the emergence. And it is the way that the whole universe, let alone our living world, let alone our own processes, that's how creation happens. That's how we are constantly sort of in this infinite like prospect of becoming. And so I feel like there's a real, along with the very grounded personal daily acts that we can do, there is something about understanding that we have over-indexed towards this very dominant, rational, linear, like goal-setting, thinking part of ourselves. And there's literally a transformation happening as we start to access the neurobiology of this whole other part of our being we don't even use. Our brain is actually also equally wired, and our being and our body is wired towards this sort of intuitive, like the animate world and the instinctual, intuitive nature. And so that's something I'm actually practicing and cultivating to learn to trust that new operating system. Actually, I don't want to say new because it's the most ancient operating system that existed before this rational mind came in and like hyper like buffed itself up. It's already there within us and it's accessible, but it takes cultivation and it takes sort of quieting that part of us that is more comfortable in the known, in the rational, in the linear, in the thinking, which has created that compartmentalization that allowed a worldview to like even emerge that wasn't, I'm going to say carefully, indigenous, a worldview of reciprocity and the absolute understanding that you were just woven as a part of life and that therefore you have to give because you're constantly receiving to create that generous flow of life. When that was co-opted with structures and very particular agendas to create separation and compartmentalization and disconnect and mechanization of the world instead of living, vital, animate intelligence, we lost that piece of our awareness, but it's not gone. So I think it's a radical reconnection of our interconnectedness with life and leaning into that space and practicing in little ways to trust ourselves and that knowing to navigate this unknown space towards where we want to head or towards where we're sort of being, maybe we have no real destiny of being able to change where we're heading, except our response to whatever is now the next cycle, whatever the intelligent next cycle is. How do we sort of realign ourselves to sort of participate with life and therefore be a co-creator of where, we're sort of heading and how we're experiencing what is an inevitable amount of change and shift. So there's just something juicy about that liminal space and that like animate intelligence and really accessing that to me feels grounded. It's sort of not only sort of this esoteric concept, it's like, this is happening in your body. This is something that already exists. And all we're doing is relearning and remembering, remembering ourselves first as like our own incredible immaculate organism. And then that organism as it breathes and lives and participates in this already existing living world that we're just this tiny, beautiful cell playing our part. So I think there's just something juicy about regenerative and embodiment that points back to this very like, you already are regenerative.
Mm-hmm. I feel like I feast on your words. They are so delicious, and juicy is the right word. Thank you for your capacity to articulate these things in such a clear and concise way. And I love that you just really highlighted this liminal space and the importance of it and the importance of cultivating our capacity to be in it. I think as society at large, we've been entrained into distracting ourselves in every way that we possibly can from being able to sit in that space. And we must learn to make our home within discomfort, to make our home within the void, to be able to sit and stay. And as you said, not grasp, not start to make movements from the mind and what we think might be the next right move, but to really be in that space of listening, attuning to that principle that is informing from the void, the pulse of creation that wants to emerge into form, so that we can be congruent agents of that we can allow that expression to move through us into the world from that place of inspiration that arises naturally when we allow ourselves to reside there without needing to do anything. Mm-hmm.
That was both of you just outstanding. And I love how that you went into talking about the nervous system, about the regeneration that we can do within our own body. I love how Amber just talked about just being and doing nothing, just being in that space of allowing life to happen. And, I've been faced with some serious unknowns. They're all freaking unknowns. They weren't literally serious. They were just unknown. They might've been what I considered serious at the time. What I'm going to tell you is that I came through those with a deep knowingness of appreciation. I really learned how to get into the moment and the now, rather than thinking about I'll be happy when. There's no win and win, W-I-N. There's no win and win. It's just not going to happen. So I love the awareness that you're bringing, also to the fact that all of you are bringing. This starts right within our body. Our bodies are constantly constantly rejuvenating. They're constantly recycling. They're constantly, and how many is it every 7 days? Our cellular structure is new. Is that right? That's what I've heard. I don't know if that's true.
I think every 7 years, your full body has completely recycled.
Yeah, your full body, but like every 7
every day
days.
is definitely happening. Every day we're shedding and
Yeah. That's just I mean, to even think about that is just so super neat. I wish a quick shout out to the audience. If you're just joining us, there's a whole bunch of great links and resources in the chat that you can check out that Jamaica has so lovingly provided for all of us. So make sure that you take a look at that. And also next week on Unify Women Rising, we will have Pam Osley back. And I cannot wait to have her back because we're going to be talking about breaking out of the matrix. So without further ado, let's listen to the last words of the hour. We're coming up. If you have any statements, make them audience, and we will pick one to share.
Thank you. Thank you for being here with us, Jamaica. And we're launching an actual Regeneration Renaissance series as well, which will be men and women and separate from this show, but probably in the fall. And it'll go for about a year and really spend like a month on each different little subjects that we want to talk about in this. So we would love to have you back for that show multiple times on any of the subjects that you want to cover with us. And thank you so much for being here with us today and your wealth of information and knowledge that you continuously share with the world and allow us to learn from you. And you are a connector, and, you know, connecting all the things that are happening and giving those updates on who should be connected for the groups that are creating impact in the story that's needing to be told with this meta narrative of what's going on. So thank you for all you do. Keep it up. And thank you so much for being here with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity to just be in juicy dialogue and for having this show. I think the last thing I'll say is that it's so vital that we have this narrative begin to emerge and that we have more places for these conversations and this information and this knowledge sharing, this wisdom sharing and this insight. I think more than anything, the strongest thing we can do is to just have an unstoppable wave of this story be so much more predominant than the existing narrative. And I think that alone will start to be enough to start touching people's lives in ways and realizing there's another way possible and that they can be a part of it. We're all a part of it. And so I'm so grateful to have this container and the many other platforms and storytellers out there that are doing this incredibly important work. I think it's the highest leverage we have, quite frankly, is changing the narrative. So thank you for inviting me and letting me be a part of that journey with you all.
Well, we talked about hyper-localized communities at scale at the beginning of this call, and I feel like there's like a strange hyper-localized, decentralized community that just emerged in this conversation. And it's so beautiful to see when the allies and the coherence and the allyship really lock on and to see what is emerging so that things don't become emergencies. And it's so great to be a part of that. But I also want to say to anyone who's out there that's listening, if you're vibing on this conversation, you are a part of that decentralized, hyper, whatever it is, community that's doing the thing. And like, we want to hear from you what your ideas are, what your projects are, so that we can map, track, and share what is going on in your worlds as well. And I'm so excited that these conversations are happening. I'm so excited for Regeneration Renaissance to continue and for us to expand the narrative and infiltrate the story of what's true. Because for me, this is what is true. This is it. And everything else is just an illusion and something that is a prescribed reality that wants to be given to us. And when we take ownership of what is most true, we have an ability to do something about it.
Thank you, beautiful. I want to bring this up Jama, thank you. We appreciate you too very much. And everyone else that is either watching now or on the replay, I want to thank you for being here today and this Saturday morning. And we have something really exciting starting right here on Unify. Shortly, I'm going to hand it over to Miranda to just give a quick shout. Jamaica, thank you so much. It's been divine to meet you. Amber, as always, I love you. You just glow. You glow. She's just all of you. My
Radiant
gratitude to you.
body. She's always
Seriously. Right, what's coming up? We've got something coming up. Is it 11 or is it 12 Pacific time
12.
today?
Yeah, 12 Pacific time. Unify is going to be on with Teresa Collins, who runs the Global Coherence Pulse, and she was on with us last week on Women Rising. But please join Unify members as we talk about elevating humanity and the emergence of what is happening in the world in an even bigger way, a 2-hour session on what Teresa's seeing with all her organizations she works with and all of us and what we're seeing. And there's music that's going to be going on. So yeah, that's in 2 hours from now. 3 hours.
It's in 2. It's in 2 hours, and we will be there with bells on. Rachel, with bells on.
Rachel and Debbie will be on the show with us. Yes.
2 hours.
And 2 hours. We love you guys so much. And remember, if you haven't liked the Unify page, please do. Please do. And share it out to your friends. There's so many great shows that come on. So we will see you again next week, again with Pam Osley, and you're going to love it because we're going to be talking about breaking out the matrix and aura colors, which is really super duper fun. Bye.
Thank you all.
Let us rise.